Guys, this is kind of weird. There's like actually some good news to talk about today. Now, it's not all good, and no RAM prices didn't crash. However, it's kind of nice to make a hardware news video and have some positive things to talk about, at least for the first half. So let's go. First of all, Nvidia's DLSS 4.5 now supports Ray Reconstruction. Why this is a big deal, and you're like, didn't DLSS 4.5 already happen? Well, it's kind of rolled out in 3 phases. Initially, we got DLSS 4.5 upscaling, which was all around a visual improvement, although there could be some performance penalties with it. Then later we got DLSS 4.5 frame generation, allowing dynamic multi-frame generation. And then now we're finally getting Ray Reconstruction. Now, NVIDIA's Ray Reconstruction combines denoising and upscaling into the same pass. So previously when we had 4.5 upscaling, in games that supported Ray Reconstruction, you had the awkward situation where you could just use normal DLSS 4.5 upscaling, but if you wanted to use Ray Reconstruction, and in some games, that was the only way to use the path tracing mode, like in Resident Evil Requiem, for example. If you switch on path tracing, you're locked into Ray Reconstruction, but the Ray Reconstruction was the older version because the newer version wasn't out yet, so you got some worse upscaling, things were a little bit blurry, all of that. So now you don't have to make that compromise. If it worked, right? Is it good enough? So when we get a new feature like this, there's always questions of, does it look better? And then also questions about performance. Does it perform the same? Is it slower? Is it faster? And I got review access to this, but I just have not had a chance to actually do enough testing to put together a video for you right now. Maybe I'll get to it. However, Hardware Unboxed does have one available today. All my sources will be linked in the video description, and I'll let you watch that video for all the side-by-sides. I'm not going to steal it. But long story short, yes, DLSS 4.5 Ray Reconstruction generally looks better in almost all cases compared to the older model, and it does it at basically the same performance, so it's not slower. So overall, this is just a straight upgrade for Ray Reconstruction, and now you no longer have to choose between the 2 models. So this overall just looks like a good thing for NVIDIA GPU users. There's some other information that seems to be getting lost in those headlines. We've also had articles talking about resizable bar controls now being added to the NVIDIA app. Although, again, it's unclear if that came in this update or it's coming in a future update. We have had articles talking about NVIDIA's Jacob Freeman posting about getting resizable bar control. So the idea with this is a resizable bar kind of hit the headlines in game performance, GPU performance, and reviews. Man, it's got to be 4 or 5 years ago now at this point. It happened with AMD's, I think it was their 6000 series GPUs had smart access memory, which originally was being touted kind of as this tighter integration between AMD GPUs and CPUs. However, it came to light that it was essentially just a feature called resizable bar, which doesn't necessarily have to be an exclusive thing between AMD parts. And NVIDIA did follow by enabling resizable bar on their 3000 series GPUs, which were out at the time, and then it's kind of gone from there. However, there's always been a distinct difference between how AMD and NVIDIA had implemented these features. AMD gave you a smart access memory toggle in their driver software that you could just turn on or off, and it was on all games. It was just all at once. So you could turn it on or turn it off just for like your whole PC, basically. Whereas NVIDIA took a different approach. They whitelist specific games where it will automatically use resizable bar, but on other games it won't. And the end user had no control over that unless you were getting into things like NVIDIA Profile Inspector, which again is not like an official NVIDIA thing that you're supposed to, right? It's kind of a thing you can get on your own. It doesn't come with just your normal driver software, et cetera, et cetera. But there has always been the case that certain games on certain hardware did perform better. If you did go ahead and manually enable resizable bar, but NVIDIA themselves didn't really give you the option to do that. So now the NVIDIA app is going to be giving you the option to either set resizable bar to auto, which I'm assuming is probably going to work based on that whitelisted behavior as it did previously, or it will allow you to just enable it at all times or disable it. And I think they'll also give you on a per software basis, kind of the way you can run it either as a global setting or per game. When we're doing things like, DLSS upgrades and such. It's looking like you'll get control for that with resizable bar now as well. So again, something I've been asking for 5 years now or whatever it's been, at least 4. It's been quite a while, and so finally getting that seems like a good thing. Now, more good news. If you are, bad news if you're trying to buy computer parts right now. But if you are, there's at least going to be some additional value headed your way, at least if you're buying the specific parts. So AMD and Nvidia are both launching new game bundles. AMD's game bundle is for Onimusha Way of the Sword, and that will be with certain AMD processors and graphics cards. Specifically, if I show eligible products here, it looks like it's their Ryzen X3D CPU, 9000X3D CPUs, and then it's looking like it's the 9070, 9070 GRE, and 9070 XT. So has to be pretty high-end stuff, but if you are buying that, and honestly, in the current GPU landscape, the 9070s, actually all 3 versions, are some of the last GPUs that have not gone completely insane compared to just like 2 weeks ago. So, if you are buying a GPU right now, those could potentially make sense, and you're getting some additional value that way with Onimusha Way of the Sword. And it looks like Asus is even launching a new tough version of the 9070 XT. That's a Onimusha Special Edition version. So if you're super into the game, maybe look into that one. But Nvidia's bundle is with Control Resonant. Now, I've got to say that the Alan Wake games and Control's kind of heavily tied into that. Some of my favorite games of all time. So I am, just because I'm honestly like just really into more of kind of like Twin Peaksy sort of vibes and all that. Not that they're perfect games, but they're very good for me. I enjoy them quite a bit. But anyway, the point is with RTX 5070 and above. So again, it's kind of on the higher end of things. But if you are getting a 5070 or above, at least maybe if you are already planning on buying Control Resonant, it takes some sting off of the price increase. But unfortunately, the 5070 shot up like to about $800 when I was checking recently. And then the 5070 Ti is now about $1,000 in the US. So a bit rough if you're trying to buy one right now. But hey, we're focusing on the good news today. At least you get Control Resonant thrown in the mix with it. Now, other good news, if you have The Witcher 3, you're about to get a remastered version, and you might be like, wait, didn't they already do an update to Witcher 3 that added ray tracing and such? Yes, but now they're doing a remastered version that adds path tracing, as well as DLSS 4.5, FSR4, and XeSS 2.0, and apparently is going to move this to a native DX12 version of the game. There's actually quite a few updates being promised here with this version of the game, including a new shading model, subsurface scattering, new tone mapping, all sorts of stuff. And again, on the PC side, getting looks like pretty extensive path tracing mode with ray traced hair, rendering parallelization. So a lighting rework overall. There's honestly, when you look at Witcher 3, it still looks nice, but you can tell that the lighting and things is from a certain time period. Lighting in a lot of games have come further, in recent years. A lot of people point back to like graphics haven't updated that much since then. They have updated. I would agree that like decade on decade, it's been one of the less impressive decades, I would say, as far as comparing to a decade prior. But there have been advancements since then. And when you look at some of the screenshots they're showing of this, the lighting in these scenes does look significantly better than what we had in especially in the base game, and then even compared to the ray traced version. Now, the ray traced version that they updated a while back when I tested it out was pretty rough on the CPU side of things. I'm hoping some of maybe this promise of parallelization and native DX12, etc. Maybe there'll be some improvements on the CPU side of things, I would hope. Because I remember that being an issue. Or maybe the game has been updated since I tested it when that ray tracing update happened. So maybe some of that's already been fixed. Now, on that note, it also looks like there's... I think they're promising that you also get the expansions for free, the original 2 expansions to the game if you already own the game, and you get this update. So this just seems like cool stuff for people who have Witcher 3 already or looking to get into it to prepare for Witcher 4. So that's cool stuff. Now, speaking of Witcher 4, we also now have a release target year. That's not the same thing as a release date, and it's being described as a target, so it could slip. But The Witcher 4 is at least targeting a 2028 release date and has over 500 developers now working on the game. Now, this work they're doing updating Witcher 3 for this remastered version won't really pay off for their tech in Witcher 4 since they've made the move to Unreal Engine 5, whereas Witcher 3 was on their in-house Red Engine. So it's kind of interesting to me that they're putting all that work in, but they are planning a new update to Witcher 3, a new expansion for Witcher 3. So maybe this is all just preparation for that Witcher 3 expansion. So it maybe sounds like they're actually putting a lot of work into that expansion for Witcher 3, which did I say Witchered? For Witcher 3. So anyway, lots of stuff on the Witcher front here. And on a somewhat related note, and I would still, I think, classify this as good news, potentially. So Blood of Dawnwalker, I recently covered the PC system requirements, and I pointed out that, like, even though they've been lowered since their original PC system requirements, they still looked fairly high, especially also the CPU side of things. To hit 60 FPS looked potentially pretty high. Shortly after that, by the way, how I was tying this into the Witcher stuff. So Blood of Dawnwalker is not made by the same studio as Witcher, but many of the key people behind The Witcher 3 are working on this game. Anyway, so there's my tie-in. But anyway, the PC system requirements looked pretty demanding, and then the console versions were released, and they only promised 30 FPS and 40 FPS modes. They did not list a 60 FPS mode originally. So that would have been classed as bad news, and I would say maybe pointed towards weak CPU optimization. However, there was a lot of backlash against that, people complaining, and they have now promised a 60 FPS mode for consoles, saying that they have that on Friday we answered your question about console performance with what we knew we could confidently deliver at launch. Performance mode was already in the works, but it was still being tested. We simply weren't ready to promise it yet. We heard your feedback. It was clear how much this mattered to many of you, so we focused on finishing the next round of tests. Those results gave us the confidence we needed to confirm performance mode for day one. Now, I don't know how they can manage to, in like a matter of a day or two or whatever, suddenly be able to promise, oh yeah, it's actually great, we can do 60 FPS, or if they're now saying this and then going into panic mode to try to get it up and running. But they are, at least for whatever reason, now saying that they can target 60 FPS on consoles. Now, my thoughts when they were originally saying that it would only be 30 or 40 FPS modes, like I said, with what they had shown for the CPU side of what they were asking for on PC, to me it pointed to this being very CPU demanding, because the CPUs in consoles aren't super powerful. Like even like Ryzen 5000 series CPUs on PC are generally more performant. Ryzen 5 3600-ish or 3700-ish performance kind of from the PS5, that kind of thing. So the thing is, though, when games want to target 60 FPS, they can often just really turn down the resolution, use upscaling. It might not look great, but you can ease the burden on the GPU by just rendering at ridiculously low internal rendering resolution. Maybe it looks terrible, but you can hit 60 FPS. That's the way a lot of games are able to do it on consoles. However, if they couldn't have promised a 60 FPS mode, that would point me towards, well, if they can't just turn down the resolution to get there, what's the bottleneck? Might be the CPU. But anyway, they are working on that 60 FPS mode, so maybe they're getting some additional CPU optimization in there, and hopefully that would also pay off for the PC version. Now, in other good news, Alan Wake 2 has finally added FSR 4. It had been on FSR 2 for a really long time, including frame generation for FSR. So more good news. And again, I know Alan Wake 2 is not for everybody, gameplay-wise, but if you're at all into like the Twin Peaks-y sort of, vibes, which I am, Alan Wake 1 and 2, I would highly recommend. But anyway. Now, we're also seeing that AMD RDNA 4M firmware has landed right ahead of the Ryzen 500 Medusa point launch. Now, when I was seeing RDNA 4M, I was really excited and hoping there was some information pointing to APUs, integrated graphics, actually based on RDNA 4 architecture that would support FSR 4 upscaling, because AMD's had RDNA 4 out there for a long time now, but their integrated graphics have continued to rely on RDNA 3.5 and not had FSR 4 support. Although now with FSR 4 moving on to some RDNA 3 stuff, the APUs were initially listed as kind of like, maybe, So maybe we'll get it there, at least with the other version of it. But it would be nice to have actual RDNA 4 based integrated graphics available. This seems to be described as more RDNA 3.5 based, though. Although this article's mentioning it's an updated branch of RDNA 3.5 with selected RDNA 4 capabilities. Now, if it could manage to accelerate FSR 4 nicely, that would be really good in my book, but I can't promise that that's going to happen. That's just what I would like to be the case, but this still seems to be mostly RDNA 3.5 based. I don't know if AMD's just waiting till like RDNA 5 before they work on, updating their APU lineup or something. I don't know. Now we're going to move into maybe the less exciting news, the bad news, but most of the video has been positive news today, guys. Okay, we did it. Now, the 9050 4GB version, I've already talked a lot about this. I hate it. However, AMD, when they initially announced the 9050, only really wanted to talk about the 8GB version, and on their official specs page, they only listed the 8GB version, which was a 128-bit card. Now, on its memory bus. Now, one of their board partners, I think it may have been ASRock, but I can't 100% remember, briefly listed the 9050 4GB product page for their card. I think it was an ASRock Challenger or something like that, and they listed it at 64-bit. And also, when you just think about how they would cut down the 8GB version to a 4GB version, and you think about how the GPU die and everything would work, it makes sense that you would lose the memory bus and it would go down to 64-bit. But that wasn't, officially posted by AMD. So AMD has now officially posted the 9050 4GB version as a product, specifically listed with the 64-bit memory bus as opposed to the 128-bit memory bus, which does mean its memory bandwidth will be reduced to 144 gigabytes per second compared to the 288 gigabytes per second. Also, its infinity cache will be down to 16 megabytes instead of 32 megabytes. Now, again, with some people still, I think, not quite understanding why, one of the reasons why I'm so annoyed by this card is because not only is it just not a powerful card, so that's its whole other thing, but the fact that you call both of these a 9050 is especially bad, because sometimes when you do that with certain cards, like you have the 9060 XT 8GB and 16GB, I already don't like that. But at least they're not doing this where you're cutting down the memory bus. They're cutting down the VRAM capacity, but not the memory bus. This is actually not only less VRAM, but it's actually cutting down the memory bandwidth, which can directly affect performance even when you are within your VRAM buffer and not spilling over the 4 gigabytes of VRAM. So this just literally can't have the same level of performance as the 8 gigabyte version, even when you are within your memory bandwidth. Memory buffer. So anyway, that's why that is so frustrating, and AMD has now indeed confirmed first party that it is 64-bit. Of course, it had to be when you thought about it, but it's now officially confirmed. Also, Hardware Unboxed recently took another look at AMD's frame generation to check whether there had been any improvements to the frame pacing, because that has been one of the big downsides to AMD frame generation compared to Nvidia frame generation. Nvidia has like the multi-frame generation and all that. I'm not too worried about that because honestly, I rarely go beyond a 2x frame gen anyway, personally. But the bigger difference between the two technologies for me has just been that the whole thing is a frame smoothing technology. It makes a motion smoothing technology. It doesn't increase the performance of the game. It just makes it look smoother on your display if the additional inserted frames are paced properly. And NVIDIA's frame generation does a very good job with that, and it does significantly increase motion fluidity. Yes, there can be penalties to latency and to image quality, but it definitely improves motion fluidity. Whereas AMD's frame generation sometimes feels like it's working smoothly, and then sometimes it doesn't, and that can change just by scene in the game that you're in. It's kind of weird. It's hard to pin down when and why that happens, but sometimes it's frame pacing just isn't what you want it to be. Hardware Unboxed took another look at that recently. Again, video will be linked in the video description, and basically confirmed that it has not improved since the earlier testing that found those issues. Now, in just kind of interest in the PC gaming space, GTA 6 leaks have been a big thing, with CyberLeak seeming to have access to a playable build of the game and posting a bunch of leaks based on that. Now, Take-Two has gone after them legally, subpoenaing Microsoft and Discord, trying to go after them to get IP addresses, account records, device information. So clearly Take-Two is taking this pretty seriously and wanting to cut down on this. We'd even seen leakers threatening to leak playable PC versions of the game and whatnot. So anyway, it's interesting to follow, but yeah, still seems like the PC version of GTA 6 will probably be coming in quite a bit after the console version. So I'll probably leave it at that for now. But hey, there was today with mostly good news, and then just, you know, a little bit of bad news at the end, which feels nice compared to where these hardware news videos have been recently. Hopefully you guys found the video useful and or interesting. Like I said, probably take a look at the hardware unbox testing here on DLSS 4.5 Ray Reconstruction for a look at that. And I hope all of you have an excellent day.